Hello, my name is Austin Yeager, and the school at which I conducted my 30 hours of observation was Mount Vernon Enola High School in Mount Vernon, Arkansas. I observed two 8th grade history classes taught by Chuck Boyd. Since I observed two different classes, I'll be referring to the first one as second period and the second one as third period because I have grows and glows for both. Referring to seating arrangements, both classes were arranged in rows facing a whiteboard and a podium at which the teacher would conduct his lessons. Now, my glow for this is that the students were allowed to sit wherever they wanted to. And, however, even though they were allowed to sit wherever they wanted to, some were put in assigned seats. Now, his reason for this, and what I observed myself, is that the students who sat in the front were most active, and if they chose to be active, they were allowed to sit there, while the students who sat in the back were the least active. Now, just because they were least active doesn't mean that they weren't paying attention, because as I observed, whenever I looked at the students, they all had their book open, they were working on their work, they just chose not to get involved in the lecture, so they preferred to sit in the back. Now, as for students having assigned seats, he would do this so they would focus better. For example, there was one student who always talked out in class. He always fell asleep in class. He wouldn't do all kinds of these things. He wouldn't stay focused. So the teacher would put him in a seat in his eyesight, just so he could see him, and he would put students all around him who were really focused. And this tended to help with it. All right, now my grow from this is because of row seating. I like the fact that, they could sit wherever they wanted to and put them in seating arrangements sometimes, just to help them focus. But the row seating, what it did is that it allowed students to sit more by their friends and out of the view of the teacher, causing some students to talk. And there were some cases where if this teacher stays in that spot and he's looking down, there's a student talking here and there's a student over here, they're talking to each other, and I can't see this far in front of my head, and that's about as far as the students were. So that's my grow for that. Now, classroom management. Now, my glow for this is the teacher had a very well-developed system for dealing with these misbehaviors. For example, let's take talking in class. Now, this doesn't warrant detention right off the dot. Now, he sees the talking in class, and the first thing he does is he looks in that direction, or he puts a hand signal up, or he does both, depending on, whichever comes first. And if the student sees him, normally that student will quiet down a little bit. But sometimes the student doesn't see him and he has to use a verbal reprimand. And the next thing, and most of the time the last thing he would have to do, is he would tell the students to see him after class. And that worked for most students, but sometimes after that he'd have to go to detention or he would send them to the office. Now, this process was very repetitious, and this is where my growth comes in. Because it was so repetitious, he ended up doing it all the time for every student, sometimes overlapping and doing the same process for the same student over and over, making the punishment become less of a threat. And when the punishment becomes less of a threat, they know that they're not going to get in trouble as often, they'll just continue to do it. Concerning classroom learning, I really liked that the teacher would connect the students to the course material. They did a lot of work out of the book, and one of the lessons I think that they were going through that I observed is they were talking about schoolhouses in slaving times. And pretty much what he was talking about is that there would be 100 schoolhouses with one teacher. And whenever he brought that up and he connected it that there were actually schoolhouses nearby that were like that back in the early 40s and 50s, students ended up raising their hand and it prompted a discussion that some of the students' grandparents actually went to those schools, and one children's grandparent actually taught at one of those schools. She was actually the school teacher. So it was very interesting and fun to see how the teacher could connect the lives of the students to the coursework. Now, my grow from this is that the teacher relied heavily on the book. There was not a lot of projects, not a lot of essays, and it was all just repetitious worksheets all the time, and it's just something that I would not put into my own classroom. Learning activities. This was a lot of fun to observe. My glow for this, the students had plenty of in-class worksheets and homework. Matter of fact, the teacher, he had a system. He had a very good cycle of worksheets and stuff that he would go through. Like he started out the cycle with a test bank that had just everything that they were going to be covering on it. And what he would do is he would pull questions from that test bank to use on the test. And then they would have their lecture in class, and he'd have a guided reading. And after the guided reading, he'd send home a section homework. We'll have a quiz the next day, guided reading, and then he'd rinse repeat up until test time. And that really helped the students, just stay focused on the material when they were doing it. However, students were given a repetition style of worksheets. As I was saying before, during classroom learning, it was very repetitious. There were 2 instances where he did use a video, but because the class was not, exposed to this outside stuff, instead of, the subject-centered work, they just didn't really respond to it. Whenever they were watching the video, they were talking to each other while the lights were off. Okay, now the classroom climate. Now, my glow for this is that it wasn't a depressing climate. The teacher really kept it upbeat at moments and everything when they were doing some activities, such as class discussion, which was the only activity that I saw other than worksheets that the teacher would do. And the class was happy during this discussion, and before and after class, they were very happy and talked with me, talked with the instructor. They asked questions during this. They were very, very talking happy. And my growth from this is that during lecture, the class went from being this happy learning environment to a very sad, gloomy learning environment. Like everybody was bored. Nobody really wanted anything to do with the lecture. Not docking the teachers, because some of the students don't learn that way. Like we learn in class, a traditional style is not always the best way for every student. Now, when I observe students resisting learning, my glow is the way the teacher approached the resistance. Okay, the teacher approached it firmly. He didn't really let a student pass when it comes to resisting learning. Anytime he sees a student daydreaming, he kind of bring them to. If you see the student reading, he said, focus on our work, when we want to work. But one thing I noticed that was really a big deal was homework. The students constantly resisted doing their homework. They would take it home, they come back, and he either get a low grade because they rushed through it, or they just weren't getting a grade at all because they wouldn't turn it in. This is where the teacher would turn to writing it on the board. You know what I mean? And this is where my grow starts to come in, is because the way he handled homework and resisting that, it kind of, it didn't really work. The writing it on the board, giving them attention for not doing the homework, it just kind of made the student not really want to do it. It didn't make the student want to do the class assignment. So I wouldn't use this method to encourage students to be more accepting of learning. I would turn to other methods like activities and stuff like that. If homework doesn't work, I would choose, something else. Now, his teaching approach, my glow for that is he was very traditional with constructive aspects. Now, he told me when I first came to the class, he said, Mr. Yeager, I just want to tell you that I'm a very traditional teacher. I do a lot of lecturing, I do a lot of stuff like this all the time, but then he gave me a reason for doing it. He said that whenever we go to college, and we can attest for this, if we've had constructive teachers that have done a whole lot of group activity and stuff like that, sure, we're getting engaged in it, we're loving it, we're having a whole lot of fun, but when we get into college, we're approached with teachers that are very traditional. We're taking notes all of a sudden. We're taking a lot more tests. We're doing a lot of things that are hard to adjust to if we've had teachers that were very constructive. Now, I like this, but this is also my growth, because not all students respond to traditional teaching. Okay, it works. Traditional teaching works, and as I observed, I noticed that it does work. But students, as I observed in that class, responded better whenever they were learning through class discussion, through a more constructive aspect. And I agree with him that we should continue being traditional with our teaching. but we shouldn't give up on the non-traditional side as well. We need to have a mix. I consider my time in this class to be extremely beneficial to my progress as a teacher. I learned a lot about the classroom and found many strategies I would incorporate in my own class. And overall, this was a very enjoyable experience. Thank you very much.